Unveiling the Sinister Path. 7 Chilling Secrets of the Cursed Post-Apocalyptic Nightmare. Lila clutched her kids tight, her heart pounding like a war drum. The shadows stretched across the cracked pavement of Wolf Fields, Ohio, giving birth to a palpable dread. She had once loved her suburban life, but now it felt like a curse wrapping tighter each day. With schools closed and the streets echoing with a ghostly silence, Lila feared there were secrets lurking, hidden in the corners of her crumbling world. Just outside her home, the familiar sounds of laughter and joy had been replaced by silence, and her instincts screamed that danger was creeping ever closer. Each evening, she trudged to the convenience store, the last flicker of normalcy in the decaying community. There, she exchanged weary smiles and nervous banter with Mark, her coworker. But when she arrived for her shift one night, the hollow absence of his presence sent a chill down her spine. Lila's skin prickled as panic twisted inside her. It was another nudge towards the edge of an unknown abyss. The reality was sinking. What was happening to their community? Were they safe? Her mind raced with unsettling possibilities. That night, Lila devoted herself to creating a haven for Alice and Leo, but eerie rustlings outside made her limbs tremble. The quiet was suffocating. Neighbors retreated into their homes, and the dog next door that used to bark at night had silenced. Lila's imagination spiraled, sewing together images of danger and chaos lurking just beyond her view. The symbols spray-painted on fences whispered tales of something dark, something she could only begin to comprehend. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Fueled by an unyielding need to protect her children, Lila took clandestine nightly walks, each stride echoing with a heavy dread. Faces flickered behind curtains, and furtive glances sent shivers racing down her spine. What could possibly be so terrifying they had to hide? Questions churned relentlessly. Each minute spent outside was a risk, but it felt necessary. Something was watching. Desperation drove her to the reclusive graces, neighbors wrapped in a shroud of secrecy. Lila knocked. With each revelation, she unearthed fragments of whispered fears, the missing pets, the shared tension. She pieced together a hair-raising mosaic of disbelief. The truth was darker than she could imagine. She could feel the weight of their secrets pressing down on her, a foreboding burden threatening to crack her fragile world. One night, as the air turned ice-cold, she spotted a figure motionless, haunting, lurking at the edge of her yard. Her breath hitched. The body was a silhouette against the murky backdrop, each heartbeat echoing like a warning. "Stay close, children," she whispered, but all the while, the laughter of her kids danced in the dark, a stark contrast to the terror building inside her. What resided behind those shadowed edges? Her resolve strengthened as she prepared herself for the confrontation. She would protect them, even if it cost her everything. But what awaited would plunge her deeper into a heart-stopping neck of the woods where trust became an illusion, and safety a myth. The figure at the edge of the yard shifted slightly. Lila's breath caught. The weight of her children's laughter hung in the air like an uninvited ghost. Shadows danced across the ground, her eyes straining to see what lay beyond the reach of the porch light. It felt too close, too real. "Keep your eyes on me," she murmured, urging Alice and Leo to press against her, their small bodies trembling, afraid but alert. Then, without warning, the figure stepped forward into the light. Lila squinted, heart racing, only to find it was a teenage boy, gaunt and wild-eyed, with dirt smeared across his sunken cheeks. He looked like he had walked through hell and back. "Help!" his voice cracked like brittle glass, words spilling from turmoil. "Who?" Lila demanded. The boy shifted nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if the darkness itself carried a looming threat. "What do you mean, help?" "They're coming." The urgency in his voice sent shards of ice through Lila's veins. "You gotta hide." "The others were taken." He broke off and turned, his gaze darting as if he feared his own shadow. What do you mean, taken? Lila pressed, confusion blending with rising dread. She glanced behind her at Alice and Leo, instinctively blocking their view of the boy. They see you. They're watching all of us. His voice dripped with a terror that was contagious, sparking a primal fear deep in Lila's chest. What are you talking about? Who is they? There was desperation in her voice, but the boy's expression only deepened with panic. A rustling in the nearby bushes pierced through the tension. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look, the shadows lashed out like hungry creatures, smothering the remnants of her once safe world. Get inside, she commanded, urgency flooding her tone. Alice and Leo hesitated, but the boy's terrified eyes urged them on. Please. You don't understand, they can smell fear. The boy's words ignited something primal within Lila. She hoped for any sense of understanding amidst the chaos. The quickening sounds of movement nearby heightened her senses. What do you know about them? But the boy wouldn't elaborate. He was already pulling back into the darkness, a specter retreating. Wait! Lila pleaded, but he disappeared between the trees as abruptly as he had appeared. She felt a prickling at the back of her neck, a sense of foreboding wrapping around her. The children were tugging at her hands, eyes wide and scared. There's something bad out there, she whispered, holding them close as muffled shuffling and hushed voices came closer, filling the hollow night. With a sudden crash, a faint echo of laughter exploded from across the street, devilish giggles that sent a chill spiraling down her spine. Lila's heart hammered painfully against her ribs. She darted forward, pulling Alice and Leo with her. Inside. Now! As they bolted toward the safety of their home, the pale moon illuminated the symbols slashed across the fences in chaotic strokes. They were more than graffiti. They were a warning, a message of something sinister that downed the neighborhood. The door slammed shut behind them, and she locked it tighter than ever, a sense of resolve blazing fiercely within. But as she turned to soothe her children, she remembered the boy's haunted eyes and the shadows swirling just outside. Lila had thought she understood the darkness lurking nearby, but she had barely scraped the surface. Whatever was haunting Wolf Fields had teeth, and they were hungry. Suddenly, a thud echoed against the back door, followed by whispers seeping through the walls. Lila's breath caught once more, her instincts screaming as dread clawed at her insides. What if it was too late? Would they have enough time to uncover the truth before they became the next victims swallowed by the night? The walls seemed to pulse with the whispers, each syllable sharp like a knife. Lila pressed her back against the door, heart pounding in her throat. Stay quiet, she hissed to Alice and Leo, who clung to her like lifelines, wide-eyed and trembling. A soft scratching sound began at the back door, like fingernails dancing on wood. Horror gripped her tighter than fear alone ever could. She raised her finger to her lips, urging silent compliance, as she moved away just enough to glance at the windows. The outside world felt wrong, shifting. Shadows flickered against the glass, elongating and contorting in grotesque manners as the wind rustled through the trees. Mommy? Leo's voice quivered, breaking a silence thick with panic. Not a word, she whispered, her eyes darting about the room, desperate for something, anything. A weapon? A phone? But the last report of the news rang in her ears, drowning out everything else. Strange disappearances. Children going missing during the night. Every story felt like a separate thread knitting together the chilling tapestry she was trapped in now. Lila could see it more clearly now, like a child's drawing gone awry. Another thud against the door rang out, stronger this time. It jolted Lila forward, a gasp escaping her lips. Go to the basement, she breathed, urgency creeping beneath her skin. The children didn't argue. They were wise to obey her instinct to keep them safe, even if it meant facing the eerie unknown below. Together? Alice asked, eyes misty with unshed tears. Together, Lila nodded, forcing courage into her own voice. As they tiptoed toward the basement door, Lila's mind raced. What had that boy warned her about? Who was coming? The fear loomed, threatening to engulf her as they descended the stairs into the darkness. The air was dank and cold, wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. With every step, Lila felt the darkness pressing against her, as if it were alive. The corners of the basement were swallowed in shadows, familiar items looming as phantoms. In that moment, just breathing became a challenge as the weight of her situation crashed into her. They reached the small window to the outside, and Lila paused. Dark shapes moved across the yard, flitting too quickly for her to grasp, but she caught glimpses, faces twisted with malice, outlines that resembled children, laughing in a broken, taunting manner. Heart sinking, she realized it wasn't just her kids they were after. They were hunting. "Mommy?" As Alice's voice barely broke the tense silence, dread wrapped around Lila like a vine. "Just a moment," she murmured, her eyes glued to the window. The shapes stopped directly beneath the glowing moonlight, freezing in time as an unsettling stillness settled over the scene. Then one turned its head towards her, eyes glinting like shards of glass in the night. Lila stumbled back, one hand reaching toward the children. "We have to move!" A sound echoed outside, something sinister charging toward the house. She dashed toward the fuse box, her fingers trembling as she flipped the switch, plunging them into pitch darkness. She could hear them breathing, whispers weaving through the still air, creeping closer. "Mommy, I'm scared," Leo whimpered, clenching her leg, oblivious to the danger sifting through the wood. Lila held them tightly, her breath shallow. "We need to stay quiet, just hold on," she managed, as the whispers grew louder, battering against her psyche. Suddenly, a crash rang out from above, as if something had forced entry into their home. The sounds of footsteps echoed through the hall, drawing nearer. Every instinct screamed that their sanctuary had been breached. "Will they find us?" Alice whimpered. Lila could only respond with silence, for the truth screamed at her. The shadows in Wolf Fields were far worse than she imagined. And now, they were already here. Just as the footsteps approached the staircase, she noticed a faint glow beneath the door at the top of the stairs, outlining the intruders like a sinister halo. Shadows sprang to life, flickering ominously against the walls as those haunting giggles burst from the depths above. What would await them if they stayed concealed, and would the written warnings of doom come true? Lila's heart sank as she realized she wouldn't have to wait long to find out. The glow intensified, seeping through the door frame like liquid fear, warming the cold air around them. Lila could hear the giggles more clearly now. High-pitched, playful, and yet brutally mocking, they echoed off the basement walls, filling the void. A shudder rippled through her as the footsteps halted on the landing above, followed by a scuttling sound, like something small yet menacing moving about in the darkness. "What is happening?" Alice whispered, her voice barely a breath, as if even speaking too loudly might invite the unseen horror into their midst. "I don't know," Lila replied, heart racing, "but we can't stay here." Before she could think, she pulled the children toward a stack of old boxes in the corner, shoving them behind the brittle cardboard. "Stay quiet," she hissed, her breath catching in her throat. The basement seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening, thickening. It felt alive with menace. Leo clung to her, trembling and tiny. "Mommy, what if they come down?" He peered up at her with wide, fearful eyes. Shalila urged, trying to keep her own terror at bay, "Just stay put. Close your eyes." She stayed low, ready to pounce at any moment, adrenaline pumping through her veins. The door creaked open above them, an agonizing slow motion that sent a chill down Lila's spine. Through the sliver of light, she could see shadowy figures, their outlines distinctly childlike yet contorted in an unnatural way. They piled into the house, giggling and whispering in a cacophony of laughter that made Lila's blood run cold. "Find them!" one of the wayward shapes commanded, its voice twisted, dripping with malice. Lila felt her stomach drop as the giggles burst into a more frenzied pitch. They scattered like roaches, crawling and rustling through the house. "No, please," she breathed, shifting subtly to inch closer to the children as they huddled tighter together. Lila's mind raced with desperation. The basement held no exits, no escape but the way they had come. Suddenly, the children's soft gasps broke through the clamor above, drawing attention. From the sound of trailing footsteps, a figure bounded down, eyes glistening with wicked delight and a grin that seemed twisted and eerie. "There they are!" The voice was shrill, young yet imbued with a sense of predatory thrill. Lila's heart pounded harder in her chest as she fought the overwhelming urge to scream. "Run!" Lila hissed, wide-eyed but resolute. Throwing caution into the night, she flung the boxes aside and bolted toward the basement stairs. The children followed instinctively, terror propelling them faster than the screaming fear. But destiny had other plans. The footsteps echoed behind them, heavy and relentless, like a storm poised to drown them. "Where are you going?" The taunting voice danced through the air, dripping with glee. Lights flickered above, shadows whipping around. Lila knew they couldn't hide in the basement forever. She pushed through the door, sprinting into the next room. The second they crossed the threshold, something heavy barreled into the door behind them, slamming it shut. The house rattled, its foundation shaking with the resonance of a grotesque game of hide and seek. "Mommy!" Leo's voice echoed in the cramped space, fear slicing through the confusion. "Look for a way out," Lila commanded, scanning the walls frantically. Chills ran up her spine as she caught the faint sound of laughter once again, rising even louder, like a twisted symphony echoing through the dark corridors of their doom. Suddenly, a window caught her eye, just barely accessible. "This way," Lila urged, returning to her maternal instincts. Yet as they dashed toward it, the whispers morphed into a tangled chorus, wrapping around her thoughts. "You can't escape, you're ours." At that moment, a horrifying realization hit her, a shard of truth that sliced through the terror like a knife. Who were these laughing children on the hunt? What had they become? As Lila prepared to pull the window open, the door began to creak. The overwhelming urge to flee surged within her. They had to escape. But would the shadows allow it? With a final glance back at the encroaching figures, Lila felt doubt slap her hard. Fear crested and crashed. Would they break free, or would the darkness reclaim them? Lila reached for the window, her fingers trembling as the laughter grew closer, an orchestra of dread echoing in her ears. She tugged at the window, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if the very wood resisted her, holding them captive within the suffocating grasp of the room. "Mommy, hurry!" Alice's voice sliced through the haze of terror. Lila kicked at the base of the window, desperation fueling her frenzied effort. With a final shove, the frame gave way. The window creaked open, rusty hinges protesting like the spirits trapped within the walls of this house. The cool night air brushed against her face, invigorating yet chilling. Freedom. But it felt treacherous, a glimmer of hope that dangled before her, teasing but out of reach. "Climb out, quickly!" she urged, her voice urgent but strained. Leo was the first to scramble toward the opening, crawling up the narrow ledge. Suddenly, a distant thud echoed from the hallway, and the laughter erupted into a high-pitched cackle, a sound so grotesque that it made Lila's stomach twist. "Where did you go?" The voice imitated a child but was distorted, like a broken record. It reverberated off the walls, creeping deeper into her bones. The shadows at the edge of the room flickered, ominous and alive, suggesting that the children no longer resembled what they once were. "Get out! Get out!" Lila screamed, pushing Alice toward the window. But as Alice started to follow Leo, she paused, turning back. "Mommy, what if they get you? Don't worry about me. Just go." Panic surged through Lila like electric shock. If Alice lingered, she might become their next plaything. Alice hesitated, her small face a mask of fear and confusion. The laughter crescendoed, wrapping around them, each giggle a lash of terror that gripped Lila's heart tighter with every passing moment. She couldn't bear the thought of her children trapped in this nightmare. "Now, Alice!" Lila cried, her voice cracking as she felt time slipping away. Alice moved, but her tiny body hesitated at the edge. Lila pushed her. "Go!" As Alice scrambled out, Lila turned her focus back to the door. It trembled violently. The figures were drawing near. They could smell fear. The scuttling noise resumed, closer now. A wave of icy dread washed over her. Turning fully toward the obfuscated doorway, Lila's breath came in ragged gasps. She had to block the entrance. For a fleeting second, a plan formed: use the boxes stacked against the wall. Mustering every ounce of strength, she pulled them toward the door, breathing hard, her mind screaming for time to freeze. With the last box wedged against the doorknob, she turned, assuring herself the children were safe outside. She inhaled sharply, the cold air stinging her lungs, panic locking itself in her chest like a vice. Then she heard a low, throaty chuckle mixed with the sound of soft footfalls. They were right outside. A shadow stretched under the door, elongating like a spindly spider reaching for its prey. Lila took a step back, heart racing. She had nothing left, nothing but her will to fight. The door rattled again, and the eerie figures from the landing above were forming into shapes, morphing into recognizably distorted versions of children she once knew, their faces twisted in mockery. "Join us," they called softly, voices full of sweetness yet laden with malice. "We only want to play." "No! You're not my children!" Lila shouted, her voice fierce and unyielding even as her heart sank further into panic. The door jolted again, nearly giving way. As she prepared herself for the worst, a loud bang shook the house, forcing her back against the wall. The door frame splintered. Splinters flew through the room, and from the chaos appeared an adult figure, face obscured by shadow yet emanating an aura of authority. "Run!" the figure barked, eyes fierce as they turned to Lila. Before she could question, a hand grasped her wrist, pulling her toward the now open window. Lila began, but was prompted to move as the figures lunged through the growing gap. "Now!" There was urgency in the voice that snapped her out of bewilderment. Without thinking, Lila leaped through, landing awkwardly on the grass outside. Leo and Alice crouched nearby, their expressions a blend of confusion and relief. But Lila turned back toward the house, breathing hard, fear washing over her like a cold tide. What had she released? "Who are you?" she demanded, seeing only a silhouette framed by the house's ominous glow. The figure glanced back, their face still obscured. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." And with that, darkness began to seep out into the yard, swirling, eager to reclaim its lost shadows. Lila's heart pounded as uncertainty gripped her. Did they escape, or had they merely stepped into a more harrowing chapter of the nightmare? "Run!" she cried, grasping the children's hands tightly. They dashed into the night, but as they did, a chilling realization dawned on her: there was nowhere to hide from whatever haunted them now. The true horror was yet to come. They ran through the darkness, the cool air biting into Lila's skin as she pulled her children closer. Panic coursed through her veins like lightning. The ground felt unsteady beneath her, a treacherous path laden with threats unseen. The figures still loomed in her mind, their laughter echoing, taunting her inability to protect the ones she loved most. "Where do we go?" Leo gasped, glancing back at the house. Its windows glowed eerily, flickering with the remnants of the figures inside. They followed the haze of amber light, and she felt a pit of dread settle in her stomach. "Anywhere but here!" Lila shouted, her heart pounding, urgency flooding her voice. As they sprinted down the gravel path, the croaking of frogs and the rustling of leaves seemed to warp into whispers, as if the very night was conspiring against them. Shadows stretched and twisted, morphing into suspicion, and paranoia seeped into her thoughts. Each time she dared to glance back, she half expected to see those grotesque shapes emerging from the darkness, their laughter becoming inescapable. But in that rush of adrenaline, she spotted a flicker of hope. A small cabin loomed up ahead, shrouded in trees. A single light flickered weakly from within, inviting yet ominous. She hesitated. Could it be their salvation, or another trap? "Mommy, I'm scared," Alice whimpered, her small hand trembling in Lila's grip. "Me too, Alice, but we can't stop. We have to keep moving," Lila urged, squeezing her daughter's hand as reassurance. The words tasted bitter, yet they propelled her forward. They surged toward the cabin, every instinct urging Lila to knock down the door and find sanctuary. She kicked it open, a creak echoing through the silence, disrupting the stillness of the night. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the acrid scent of decay. Dust motes swirled in the solitary beam of light coming from an oil lamp atop a rickety table. The walls were lined with faded photographs, faces looking out with eyes that felt as if they were evaluating her worth. "Is it safe?" Leo asked, his small frame trembling. Lila turned to him, steeling herself. "It has to be." But doubt gnawed at the corners of her mind. "Don't let them in!" A frantic voice shrieked from a shadowed corner. A woman emerged, wild-eyed, dirty clothes clinging to her frame. "They'll take you. You have to leave." "Who?" Lila asked, stunned, her instincts on high alert as she felt heat rising from the darkness behind her. What could be worse than what they had escaped? "Those things," the woman gestured wildly. Her words caught in her throat. "If they catch you, if they get in here, there's no escape." Before Lila could react, a soft tapping began at the window, barely audible yet filled with sinister promise. It was the laughter again, haunting and derisive, sending a cascade of nausea through her stomach. "I can't," the woman stammered, backing away, her wide eyes locked onto the window. "You have to hide." Lila took in the dim room, a cramped space filled with shadows that seemed to pulse with an unease of their own. "Where?" she pressed, fear bubbling to the surface. "Under the bed," the woman shouted, but Lila was already feeling the rules of the game changing. Those shadows were alive, creeping closer, tasting their fear. The tapping intensified, nails scraping against the wood. "Quick!" Lila urged her children, "under there." They scrambled beneath the bed, Leo's eyes wide with horror, Alice biting her lip to keep from crying. As Lila ducked under, she could barely breathe for the weight of dread pressing down on her. But just then, the woman drew closer to the lamp, flame flickering, illuminating her face further. "Please don't let them in." Her voice trembled as the tapping turned into frenzied banging. Suddenly, the door flew open, and Lila's heart stopped as a gust of wind extinguished the lamplight, plunging them into suffocating darkness. The laughter returned, closer now, echoing around them. "Let us play." Lila's heart raced. What had she led her children into? And as the shadows flickered in the darkness, the woman's voice turned frantic. "Run! You can't let them have you." In that moment, Lila knew. Escape wasn't just necessary, it was the only way to survive what was about to unfold. But as the laughter enveloped her, would she manage to save her children, or would they be lost in the shadowy depths forever? The suffocating darkness beckoned, and with it, an unknown fate awaited. A heavy silence settled in the cabin, a stillness so profound that it drowned out the thumping of Lila's heart. The darkness was palpable, an entity of its own, wrapping around them with creeping fingers. She strained to listen, her breath shallow, desperate. "Mommy, I'm scared." Alice's tiny voice was a whisper, punctured by the echo of that mocking laughter. "Sure," Lila hissed, trying to erase the fear from her daughter's voice. "Stay quiet." The woman's frantic eyes scanned the dark corners, searching for those horrors. Lila clutched her children tighter, feeling their little bodies trembling against her. She could almost hear the laughter mingling with the pounding of something heavy outside, something large, hungry. Each thud felt like a countdown, a warning that time was slipping away. "Why won't they leave?" Leo said, his voice cracking. Lila had no answer. The cabin felt like a trap, its very walls filled with secrets wrapped in shadows. She peered out from beneath the bed, daring to tilt her head just enough to gauge the dimness around them. The oil lamp was out, but she could just make out the shape of the woman, now crouched, hands covering her ears against the horror closing in. "Get away from the window!" Lila hissed urgently, barely managing to restrain her panic. The idea of those things breaching their fragile sanctuary sent chills rushing down her spine. With a sudden rustle, the window creaked open no more than an inch. The woman let out a choked scream, hands flying to her mouth as the laughter intensified outside, derisive and gleeful. The shadows twisted, curling like smoke in a sinister dance. "Run!" Lila whispered to her children, drawing her breath as she felt the cold air rush in, chilling her skin. "We need to go." Fearful, Leo shook his head. "They'll see us." "Not if we're quick," she said, voice tight. "We can't stay here. Trust me." She glanced back at the woman, whose eyes were wide, reflecting a kind of terror Lila couldn't comprehend. "No!" You don't understand. The woman pleaded, they'll get in. If they catch you. No one has ever escaped. But Lila's every instinct screamed for survival. She motioned for the children to crawl out first, the air thickening with an oppressive sense of doom. They slipped silently from their hiding place. Each step felt like an eternity. The darkness pressed in, squeezing their breaths and amplifying every creak of the floorboard beneath them. They crossed over to the door, heartbeats loud like war drums, but before she could turn the knob, the laughter paused. A thick silence suffocated the space. What is it? Leo breathed, eyes darting to Lila. Then came the soft scraping sound, a whisper of movement from beyond the door. Something was tugging at the handle, testing their defenses. Lila's blood ran cold, panic flooding her mind. Get back, she warned, pressing them against the wall, the wood rough against her back. The door rattled, the laughter erupting once more menacing and right on the other side. Playtime is about to begin. Let us in. Lila was trapped, her heart racing wildly. The woman beside her had suddenly gone still, fear giving way to something darker in her eyes. Lila felt a shiver run through her. Please, you have to. The words tumbled from Lila's lips, but she was cut off when the woman knelt down again, clutching Leo's arm fiercely. They don't want you to leave. With horror dawning, Lila made the connection. That's what they wanted. They wanted to keep them here. As the door shuddered violently, she felt the floor rumble beneath her. They were fighting for air, gasping as the pressure of their dread mounted. Shadows spilled through the crack under the door, creeping like sentient strands, hungry and desperate to enter. Mommy! Alice shrieked, eyes wide with terror. Without a moment's hesitation, Lila's instincts kicked in. Now! She shouted. She slammed her body into the door, desperate to block whatever malevolence was trying to break through. But as the laughter swelled to a fever pitch, she knew they were losing the battle. And for the first time, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. Would they end up as part of the cabin's haunt? The laughter mixed with something deeper. A voice echoed, luring. We want to play a game. As Lila readied herself to fight, the world seemed to fall away, the air thick with unshakable dread. Moments stretched into suffocating silence, leaving her with one desperate question. Would they let go of her children? Or take them forever? Just as she braced for the worst, something shattered outside, a ghostly scream that filled the night, sending chills down her spine, and at that moment, Lila realized whatever they had escaped might be the least of her worries. A deeper horror was about to unveil itself, leaving her with a horrible realization. It wasn't just her children at risk, but an evil that would stop at nothing to possess their very souls. The splintering crash echoed through the cabin, drowning out the mocking laughter for a brief, heart-stopping moment. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she turned, eyes wide with horror. The wall next to the window had erupted into chaos, shards of wood flying. Something had crossed the threshold. A shadow emerged from the wreckage, a twisted, dark figure that seemed to coalesce from the very night itself. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding rather than walking, its features obscured by a cloak of darkness that writhed and pulsed. Lila's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet were glued to the ground, terror freezing her in place. Close your eyes. She hissed at her children, desperate to shield them from the horror unfolding. Alice clutched Leo tight, her small body trembling against her brother's. The figure paused, a sound like brittle bones cracking resonated in the quiet. Let the games begin, it rasped, and with that, the mocking laughter returned, louder, more sinister than ever. In a panic, Lila yanked the children back towards the door, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a caged animal. The woman next to her had pressed her face into the floor, crying silently, defeated. Stop! You can't go out there! She wailed from the corner, fear swirling in her eyes, but Lila had no choice. The air was thickening, suffocating, and the shadow moved closer, stretching out an elongated hand adorned with gnarled fingers, twisted like tree roots. You think you can escape? It taunted. Suddenly, without warning, the cabin shook violently. The windows rattled, and the boards creaked under an unseen weight. Lila gasped, clutching her children, pulling them in tight as the shadows on the walls became more animated, like specters dancing in delight. Another crash, this time at the door, splintered the frame as it buckled under the pressure. They had to get outside. A surge of adrenaline flooded Lila's veins. "Follow me," she shouted, making a break for the door. The moment she turned her back, the woman screamed, "No! Don't leave me! Mommy, no!" Leo pleaded, but Lila pushed the door open with a force she didn't know she possessed. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The world outside was a hazy nightmare. Once free, she grasped her children, a frantic pulse of survival driving them forward into the darkness. The forest was alive with sound, the rustling of trees, the scratching of branches against skin. Her senses heightened, a predator on the hunt. But as they sprinted, something tugged at her, cold fingers wrapping around her ankle, pulling her down with a sudden ferocity. Lila stumbled and fell, skin scraping against unforgiving ground. She screamed as the children yanked her back, pulling her to her feet. "Keep running!" she gasped, adrenaline flooding her system. They pushed deeper into the woods, shadows dancing between the trees, shapes drifting just beyond her line of sight. Lila dared not look back. Behind them, the creature's laughter echoed through the night, sinister and relentless, drowning out the sounds of the forest. "What do we do now?" Leo shouted, panic flaring in his eyes. Lila scanned their environment, desperate for anything that might offer a glimmer of hope. Then she saw a path illuminated by a faint, flickering light, winding through the trees like a lifeline. "There! Over there!" she urged, urgency in her voice. The children followed her gaze, and without waiting for a moment's doubt, they turned and ran towards the uncertain glow. But just as they reached the edge of the path, a shrill scream pierced the air. Lila's heart sank as Alice clutched her head, falling to her knees. "Make it stop!" she cried, trembling, as if something were clawing at her mind. Lila knelt beside her, panic gripping her. "Alice! You need to be strong!" she pleaded. But the darkness around them thickened, an oppressive fog coiling into their lungs, stealing their breath. In that moment of desperation, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if the true horror wasn't just the creature pursuing them? What if the real terror was already within her children, waiting to emerge? With urgency fueling Lila's every move, she lifted Alice, cradling her in her arms. "We need to keep moving. Whatever is out there can't be allowed to take you," she whispered, determination igniting her spirit. But as they stepped onto the path, the light flickered, swaying like a candle in a storm. Shadows erupted around them, whispering secrets in a language Lila couldn't understand. In the distance, she could hear them calling, beckoning her towards a fate she could only begin to comprehend. "Mommy, what's happening?" Leo's frightened voice cut through the chaos. Just then, the light before them dimmed, revealing the outline of a figure standing at the path's end. A silhouette, tranquil yet haunting, watching them intently. The figure seemed both familiar and unfathomably alien. "Welcome," to the dark gathering it murmured, a smile unfurling across its face, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. Lila's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Terrified and desperate, she realized they might have stumbled into something far worse than what hunted them. Could they escape the insatiable darkness? Or was this just the beginning of their nightmare? The flickering light cast distorted shadows on the ground, creating a web of darkness that clung to Lila's feet as she stood paralyzed by dread. The figure at the end of the path moved closer, its presence weighing heavily like a shroud of suffocating despair. Lila squinted, trying to recognize the familiar yet horrific features. "Mommy! I'm scared." Leo's voice trembled against the backdrop of the ominous laughter echoing through the trees. "Stay close to me," Lila shouted, her voice barely carrying through the suffocating air. She turned, holding Alice tighter, feeling her daughter's tiny heart racing against her chest. The mysterious figure opened its mouth, a chilling croon spilling from between its crooked teeth. "You've come so far, Lila. But the darkness awaits. It hungers for you and your little ones." The words twisted in her mind, fear morphing into a kind of rage. "What do you want?" "Let us go," she yelled, clenching her fists. A low chuckle bubbled from the shadow, echoing eerily as the forest around them seemed to respond, the trees shifting as if alive. You're far too late. This is only the beginning, it said, its voice thick with malice. Lila forced her legs to move, edging swiftly onto the path, adrenaline shooting through her veins. We'll find a way out, she said, urging Leo forward as the shadows reached for them, their cold fingers brushing against her skin like icy breath. The light ahead pulsed rhythmically, and with every beat, reality felt more tenuous, like a fragile thread ready to snap. Keep moving, she urged, dragging Alice as they fled down the path. But the laughter rose again, trailing after them, taunting their every step. They stumbled into a clearing. The light brightened, illuminating an ancient stone circle surrounded by gnarled trees. In the center, a fire flickered, casting a warm glow that felt out of place in such a cursed landscape. Lila could sense the weight of countless eyes on them, the figures of past victims leering from the edges of the forest, their faces a grotesque mixture of horror and despair. What is this place? Leo asked, wide-eyed. I don't know. Lila's heart raced, desperation mingling with determination. But we can't stop now. As they dashed towards the fire, a piercing shriek echoed through the woods, freezing them in place. Leave. Now. The familiar voice was Alice's, yet not quite an unsettling distortion that reverberated in Lila's ears like a death knell. What? Alice? She turned, confusion clouding her mind. But Alice stood there, eyes wide and vacant, as if her soul were being siphoned away by unseen hands. No! Alice! Lila lunged forward, but the moment she did, Alice's body jerked, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. Help me, Mommy! The girl's voice was sweet yet layered with something dark, something that made Lila's blood freeze in her veins. Stop! Lila screamed in desperation, feeling the air thicken around them. Everything grew silent, the laughter vanishing, leaving an eerie stillness. Come to me, Lila, the figure called, its voice slithering under her skin. Join the gathering. No! You can't have her! She held Alice tight, but the child's limbs began to tremble, shaking involuntarily. As Lila realized the horror was not just closing in from the outside but within her own child, a sickening dread filled her. The fire flickered more violently now, revealing shapes in the smoke, twisted faces forming from the sparks, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The realization crashed down on Lila. This dark gathering wasn't just about them escaping the creature. It stole the very essence of those it ensnared. Make them stop! Alice cried out, her voice warped with pain, tears spilling down her cheeks. A plea that echoed the collective fear of all the lost souls trapped within the shadows surrounding them. Lila's heart shattered. I'll save you, I promise. But the darkness lurked closer, whispering lies, spinning a web of torment, waiting for her to falter. Then, unexpectedly, from within the circle, the fire blazed bright and a figure emerged, a flicker of hope. Or another trap? Lila held her breath as the shadows recoiled from the light. Stay near the fire, she shouted, clutching Alice to her side, uncertain of what to believe. Mommy? Leo's voice broke. What if it wants us? What if? Lila whispered, her eyes locked on the figure stepping toward them, relief and dread battling within her. But before she could determine friend or foe, a shadow detached from the trees, responding to the figure with a guttural growl. They will not escape, it hissed, its gaze boring into Lila. Lila's heart raced. The darkness hadn't just noticed them. It was hungry for them, ready to pounce at the slightest misstep. You'll never leave, the figure warned, extending a long, clawed hand as the air thickened again, charged with a malicious energy. As terror cascaded through her, Lila's mind spiraled in a panic. What was she supposed to do? The shadows tightened, and the remnants of a struggle erupted in her heart. She couldn't lose her children to this nightmare. Think, Lila! She demanded to herself. What's the way out? The flickering light seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, and in its glow, a desperate idea struck. But before she could voice it, dark tendrils crept closer, slithering along the ground, reaching for her, and suddenly, Leo screamed. "Mommy! Run!" As the world spiraled into chaos, she realized they might not have time to escape the gathering shadows or figure out the truth behind their predicament. They were caught in a relentless fight for survival where every choice could lead to liberation or damnation. With a choice made, she tightened her grip on Alice, feeling the weight of their fate resting in her hands. Would they find a way out, or was this truly only the beginning of their horror? The darkness loomed ominously behind them, ready to swallow them whole. The fire crackled fiercely, illuminating the faces contorted in eternal despair that surrounded Lila, Alice, and Leo. The shadows that writhed beneath the ancient trees sought to reclaim their prey, stretching and curling closer, hungry for their pain. "Stay with me," Lila urged, holding Alice tightly. Leo pressed close, his little body shaking with fear. Lila felt an ancient weight settle on her heart, memories flickering in her mind like dying embers. The vision of their home nights spent snuggled together in comfort, laughter echoing off the walls, all those mundane moments that felt like a tranquil dream now lost in the abyss. "Mommy, I'm scared," Alice whimpered. Her eyes, wide with fear, looked past Lila, searching for a glimmer of safety amidst the chaos. "Me too, honey. But we have to be brave," Lila whispered back. They were trapped between two worlds, the light flickering with hope and the dark, suffocating shadows echoing with laughter that filled every crevice of the forest. Suddenly, the figure at the edge of the gathering stepped forward. "You can't save them, Lila," its sneered voice dripping with disdain. "You cannot escape fate." Shadows morphed and pulsed as if the forest itself had begun to conspire against them. The depths of horrific laughter spiraled through the air, a haunting song meant to envelop them in despair. In that moment of despair, something deep within Lila stirred a protective instinct that surged like a wildfire through her. "No!" she shouted, defiance pouring from her lips like a fountain of strength. "You want to take my children?" As if in response, the light from the fire flared brighter, illuminating the forms around them, revealing anguished expressions trapped within the very shadows clawing at them. Lila's heart thundered in her chest, and she felt the fierce bond of love tightening around her children like an unbreakable chain. There was no time for hesitation. "Hold on to me," Lila commanded. She tightened her grip on Alice, her eyes darting around the clearing as the ground threatened to tremble beneath her feet. Suddenly, she realized last night's memories were not just moments to mourn, they were a source of strength. The laughter didn't terrify her, it ignited a fury deep within. With all her might, Lila stepped toward the blazing fire. "I will not let you take us," she yelled defiantly, pushing through the fear like a warrior charging into battle. "I choose love. I choose life." The shadows recoiled. A gust of wind burst through the clearing, swirling, swirling, as if caught in an unseen tempest, smashing against the specters surrounding them. Lila felt that internal warmth expand, a golden light growing brighter in her heart. With each step closer to the flickering flames, the shadows shrieked, their miserable cries weaving into a chaotic symphony of dread. Then, in one swift movement, she pointed toward the fire. "We leave together. We stand together." The words echoed with conviction, and a crack echoed, sending a ripple through the air. Without a second thought, Lila pivoted, her children clutching her tight, and charged into the circle of fire, a wall of light forming an invisible barrier. Time splintered, and as the embrace of flames enveloped them, Lila felt the tendrils of darkness pull at the edges of her consciousness, seeking to tear them apart. "Fight!" she screamed into the chaos, pushing her will outward to shield her family. Alice and Leo clutched her tightly, faith shining like a beacon in her heart. The moment they breached the circle, a vibrant wave surged around them, cleansing the air of despair. The shadows recoiled in a frenzy, howling as Lila pushed through them, their anger rich and thick like a storm cloud. As the trio reached the edge of the clearing, Lila turned back, watching as the night began to consume itself, shadows twisting into the trees and collapsing into nothingness. "We did it!" she cried, incredulity washing over her. The fire still crackled, but the pressure of the dark gathering loosened, fading like an echo in the night. They stumbled onto a dirt path in the woods, hearts racing, the light around them calming, a gentle glow guiding them home. "Mommy, are we free?" Leo asked, looking up with eyes glistening. "Free," Lila whispered, her heart swelling with relief. Just then, she spotted a flicker of gold at the end of the path and exit, a way back to their world. "Let us go." They ran, their feet pounding against the earth, the looming darkness behind them dimming. Each stride felt weighted down with the remnants of fear, but the warmth of newfound hope surged with every step. When they reached the edge of the trees, dawn broke, golden rays spilled across the horizon like a long-lost friend. Lila's heart fluttered with joy as she pulled her children into a fierce embrace. They were alive, together, unbroken. As the sun rose higher, Lila realized their world would never be the same. But together, they could forge a new path. "Don't look back," she said softly. "We're stronger than the darkness." Alice and Leo nodded, light spilling around them like a gentle caress. And as they stepped forward, hand in hand into a future unwritten, Lila pledged her heart anew to protect, to love, and to never let the shadows take them again. But remember, those who listen, some darkness lingers, even in daylight. Always stay vigilant. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm seriously, it makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel. Only true fans understand the importance of these actions.